Back to Ottawa, the Minister of National Defence is being asked about Donald Trump's election win. Here is Bill Blair.
Mr. Trump is going to, obviously want us to ramp up our defense spending. So he said he wants us to get to 2%.
Yeah, we want to get to 2% too. We've made a commitment to do that. We've got a plan, and we're working hard towards it.
But there is an immediate threat here because he said he needs us to get there now. We're supposed to get there in a couple of years from now. Are you not concerned about that time?
My responsibility is to the Canadian Armed Forces and the Canadians. We're investing significantly in our defense capabilities. We've made a commitment to all of our NATO allies, including the United States, that we have a plan to get there, and we're going to work really hard at it.
Are you concerned about Trump, what Trump could do, for Ukraine's defense against Russia?
Actually, I think Canada's position with respect to our support for Ukraine remains resolute, and we're going to continue to provide that. My expectation is that all members of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group will continue in their support of Ukraine, and yes, we'll be interested and follow carefully if there's a change in any of the NATO members' position with respect to
I got to ask about Lloyd Austin. Who do you think will follow Lloyd Austin as SecDef?
All right, that is Bill Blair, Minister of Defense for the Canadian government, reacting to the news that Donald Trump is now the president-elect in the United States. Let's turn once again to CBC's Janice McGregor, joining us in Ottawa. Janice, over to you.
Yeah, there's a lot of different files we're watching here in the aftermath of this news. The defense one, certainly one of them. I just want to highlight a couple of things, just even to parse those answers of Bill Blair's. First of all, he talked about them having a plan to get to 2% of GDP in terms of Canada's military spending. I think the question going forward is, will the Trump administration be as patient with Canada on this front? Will the plan be enough, or does it want to actually see the spending happening now? We know how Donald Trump feels about his definition of allies, that he has threatened people who don't pull their weight, not to protect them. What that looks like for Canada, which is unable to defend its borders on its own, that needs to work with the U.S. in matters like NORAD at a time when the threat faced by Russia, ever more acute, which sort of brings us to the second question in that scrum, about Ukraine. You heard the minister there sort of choosing his words carefully about how Canada's position with respect to Ukraine remains resolute, but that they would follow carefully any changes among their NATO allies. I can only help but read that as sort of a signal, without saying as much, that they are concerned about how a future Trump administration would approach this conflict. Trump's foreign policy is a bit of a paradox, because in some respects he's more isolationist, more America alone, not wanting to be involved in foreign wars. But then with respect to other conflicts, you think of the Middle East, his enthusiasm for perhaps bombing Iran and those sorts of things, he is very much sort of more about kind of being militarily engaged in other parts of the world. So there's not really a consistent ideology driving it. It's very much case by case, but particularly in Ukraine, because of the ties, Trump himself, but people around him also, as reported, particularly since leaving office, the things we have learned about the people around Trump. A lot of concerns, I think, about whether there is going to be a shift now with Trump again in charge and what that means for Ukraine. And we know that President Zelensky and Prime Minister Trudeau spoke earlier this week, and a lot of conversations, phone lines indeed, virtual or otherwise, burning between allies on that. We have heard from a number of cabinet ministers today. Sean Fraser, a housing minister, also scrummed after the morning caucus meeting today, talking about how that was even going to be impacting his portfolio, housing. A lot of concerns about Canada's borders, watching carefully some things they've been trying to fix over time. If it becomes a kind of preoccupation of a White House, you do have to wonder about that. And of course, beyond sort of the security questions, the national security questions, you have the economic questions, the trade relationship. Although really, for Justin Trudeau's cabinet, that maybe is more familiar ground, if not easy ground. This is something they've navigated before, the idea of tariffs. As we hear about the potential of a tariff on everything Canada exports, keep in mind that we also have to watch what happens to exchange rates, and we've seen sort of the dollar shifting around on this news, and the markets too. There are a lot of decisions involved in terms of people losing customers in the States or changing investment decisions Do you care about a 10% tariff if you're selling, based on a 60-cent Canadian dollar? That's how it all gets complicated. I was struck by Justin Trudeau saying the world is more complicated than it was 4 years ago. Indeed, I would say things in the Liberal caucus room more complicated now than they were just a week ago, and they were pretty complicated then for Justin Trudeau looking at the upcoming election. So we continue to watch on Parliament Hill, but if anything, what was already a very difficult fall for this Prime Minister, only getting more difficult from here.
And what are we hearing from other opposition leaders?
Right, the man who might be Prime Minister by the time the review of NAFTA rolls around again in 2026, at least if we are to take current public opinion surveys of Canadian voters at their word. Pierre Poilievre did not come out and speak to cameras. We are expecting to see him in question period this afternoon. We'll watch carefully, parse his words there. But this is what he said on social media so far, congratulating Donald Trump on his victory. I want to take note, though, of a few lines here. I won't read the whole thing. But look at that. He says, "My mission, save our jobs." And he talks about how the U.S. has taken away investment and jobs from Canada over the length of the Trudeau government. Really, I think here, talking about the same things Donald Trump was talking about with American voters, worried about their jobs. The messaging really kind of lines up tactically, right, in terms of the space you're trying to play in, and sort of the nationalist appeal about bringing home our paychecks, saving our jobs, standing up for Canada. Very much the same hymn book, really. And as if to underscore sort of the copacetic thinking, if you will, an up-and-coming MP in Pierre Poilievre's caucus by the name of Jamil Jivani was elected in a by-election during the life of this parliament, represents the Toronto area riding. He went to law school at Yale with J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's future vice president. Now, you can see him there. Cameras found him. He wouldn't take any questions about this. But a very interesting morning for him today, to wake up knowing that his old law school buddy is about to be the vice president. What does that mean going forward? How close do they remain? Apparently he read at his wedding, so they were, perhaps are, still very close. I'm going to play you a final bit of tape here. As we contemplate the future of this parliament and the way forward, the NDP continues to be the essential swing vote in this parliament. Jagmeet Singh, on his way up to Parliament Hill today for his caucus meeting, had these thoughts about last night's result.
I think a lot of folks woke up today and woke up really worried, really afraid, felt crushed. And I want you to know that now is a time for us to come together to defend Canadian interests. I know that the results of Trump, right now what it looks like Trump's election, is going to have serious impacts on Canadians. So we need to come together, all parties, all leaders, and put Canadian interests first.
If you are a progressive in this country, in the time that remains until Canada's election, during that next election campaign, knowing what's coming in the U.S., what does that mean? How do you use your time, your priorities, your resources? The subject of pretty sobering conversations in the time to come between now and especially when Canadians have to make a ballot choice about who they think might be best to manage the relationship with the United States beyond Canada's next vote.
CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.